Hey everyone, it's Miss Corley. I just figured I could make a really quick tutorial showing you what I've been teaching in class so that you know what you're doing when you're at home. Some of the supplies you're going to need are some embroidery floss. We like the 6-strand. How do you tell if it's 6-strand? Is if you tap on the end of it and it's actually 6 individual strands wound into one strand. I don't know if you can see that. Probably not, but 6 strands. Needle threaders, I have this one. You might have one that looks a little differently, but this is like a wire loop and here's a hook. I like Chanel needles. This is Chanel size 22. Size 20 are a little bit thicker, a little bit easier, but notice the very large eye and can't see it, but it's a sharp tip. It's not a blunt tip. All right, also an embroidery hoop. I've told my students it's about as big as their hand, okay? So give it a high five or it's slightly larger, that we'll be using today. First things first, how to use a needle threader. You need to take the needle and find the eye of the needle, which is the very large opening at the top. And if you're using the hook, you'll place the hook through the eye of the needle. And if you're using the wire tip, you're going to put the tip of that through the eye, which just makes the opening that much larger. Okay, so I'm going to use my embroidery floss, put the embroidery floss through that larger hole, hold it there. Actually, you can let that go because the next step is that you wiggle it off of the needle. So the needle threader is off, it's done its job, put it to the side, and we are going to have a tail at the top. We are not tying any knots, and that tail is about as long as your finger, right? I'm going to teach you to pinch the tail so it doesn't come unthreaded, the tail end of the needle, but also the tail that's going to be your gauge of telling you when you need to stop stitching, time to tie your knot. And I'm going to show you how to do that today as well. Okay, so that's how you thread your needle with a needle threader. If you were just going to use the hook end, you basically put the hook through the eye of the needle, right? So it's on there, and you hook. Let me see. You hook the thread on there, and then you wiggle it off. Sometimes it's a little thick. Oh, my hook went on the other side of my eye. You got to be careful of the hook when it does that. Sometimes the little hooky part goes on the other side of the eye of the needle, and that's not good. It's not going to help you at all anyway, right? Hopefully you could see that since I wasn't watching me do that, all right? That's that. Now, when we do our stitches, I have not taught you in this video how to use a hoop. Hopefully you've figured that one out. There are 2 different hoops. The inside of the hoop needs to face a specific direction depending on the hoop that you have. So if you have one like this, there is actually a ledge on the inside hoop that should be facing up. It actually is stamped this side up, so it should be facing up so that it locks in. This should always be nice and tight. And I tell my students to always keep that fabric nice and taut or tight around the edges so there's no wrinkles in it. And it's like a little drum. Doesn't need to be floppy. That's going to mess your stitches up, right? This would be the front. This is the back. I'm going to come up through the back. And what I'm going to do, I posted a video, but I'm going to show you guys what I'm doing here. I'm going to leave a couple of inches of thread on the back. My stitches are going to be, I've never measured them. I don't know, 1/2 of an inch, 1/8 of an inch. So once you come up, go back down, pinch the tail, pull, pull, pull. Don't pull too hard because we didn't tie a knot, right? So that little tail is still there. When we're doing the back stitch, we come up, that's about the size of my stitch. They're not large, they're not T90. You come up with your needle about a stitch distance away. Okay, so about equidistant away. Now pull, 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 but no, we're going to be careful not to pull it all the way because we want to use this loop that's forming. See that loop? I don't want to pull it all the way through because I'm just starting. I want to tuck my tail. I'm going to tuck my tail through that loop. I'm not sure you can see. My hand's in the way. I'll move my hand in a second. This is kind of challenging to do backwards. Okay. Let me pull it a little bit tighter so you can see. So I just put my tail underneath that loopy thing in the back, and look what it's doing. It's anchoring my tail down. Some of you learned the Corley knot, which is not the Corley knot. I just taught you how to tie a knot. Now what I'm going to do, in this way, actually I did this summer. We're actually going to tuck our tail so it just hides our tail. It makes it a lot nicer on the back of your project. Okay, so now as we're doing the back stitch, which direction do we go? Do we go frontwards? Frontwards. Do you go forward or backwards? Well, it's the back stitch, right? So if we're doing a running stitch, we'd continue to go around this way. But we're doing the back stitch, so we are actually going to put our needle right back down in this hole right here. It's hard for me to see backwards, so I'm going to put it in and then show you. It's going back into that same hole that you went down. Okay, pull it through. So you don't see any fibers or fabric in between my stitches. It's just a continuous line. And again, we're going to come up a stitch distance away. And again, I tell my students, you can see where you're coming up. You don't have to flip-flop your project back and forth. You can either drag your needle around or you can poke it around. You can look on the back if you want to, but it's not necessary, right? Stitch distance away. Now again, I'm still having to tuck my tail. So as I pull through, I don't want to pull too hard, and I don't want to pull it all the way. See that little loop? Now I'm going to tuck my tail. Let me see if I can do it by looking through the camera. So I just pulled my tail right through there. I'm going to anchor it down. And I'm going to try to straighten it up so it looks nice and straight. So you don't want to make you want it to be nice on the front. And again, and so on and so forth as you continue to make your stitches. Eventually, your tail will be tucked and you won't see it anymore. All right, I'm going to try to do a few quick stitches because I want to show you how to do a finishing stitch to finish it off. Tuck the tail. Now remember, when you're doing these stitches, the size of your stitch does matter. If you're rounding a corner, your stitches will get smaller so it looks round, not boxy. And if you are on a straightaway, as I like to say, your stitches should just all be the same size, very uniform. You want them to look the same. Uh-oh, I messed up. I'm going to keep going for time's sake. Do you see how that last stitch is off? Can you see that thread that's in the middle? You don't want those. But I'm going to keep going just for the sake of time. You're not in any rush when you're doing this project. So that's what I want to encourage you to do. Make your stitches quality stitches. I'm more concerned about the quality of your work than the quantity of your work. I want you to do it right. Work with excellence. This is just an example that I'll be taking out after this video so one of my students can use this. All right, so as we come to the end of my tail, and I'll show you what it looks like. See, you can't really see. I've got one more stitch I could do. I want to go ahead and show you the finishing stitch. Oops, let me get my needle back on the back. All right, so a finishing stitch, what you need to do is take that last stitch that you did, slide your needle underneath the stitch you just did. And again, once again, before you pull it all the way through, you're going to see that there's a loop forming on the other side of your stitch. So I've gone under the stitches. Now I take my needle and I go back through the loop. This is going to end up tying a knot on the end of my stitch. I got to do that at least 2 times so that it makes a knot through the loop. Now, do you remember when I told you you needed to stop stitching? I happen to have a lot of thread left, but if I kept stitching and stitching and stitching, when my tail begins to touch this fabric of my project, stop stitching, okay? It's your thread telling you it's time to do a finishing stitch. So now that I've tied my knot, I can cut it off right there at the base of that thread to make it finished. All right, and this could have been a little neater if I'd finished my tail, but here I made a mistake. There you go. All right, hope that helps you guys. Can't wait to see what you're doing. Can't wait to start on our projects. And if you have any questions, don't forget to inbox me. Bye.